5 days of endless rain, and a peaceful village turned into a floating nightmare. At first, it felt like a festival, people fishing, laughing, boats everywhere. But then, the water turned red. A boy disappeared in seconds, dragged under by something no one could see. Days later, it came back. This time, it took a woman right in front of everyone. No one was safe anymore. Not in their homes, not even in the water they depended on. What we were dealing with wasn't just a crocodile, it was a man-eating monster. And I made a decision. Either it dies, or more people will. Hey everyone, I'm Sharik, and welcome to ManEater Chronicles. This is the place where the wild turns deadly, and real stories of survival come to life. From man-eating predators to heart-stopping encounters, every video takes you deep into the most dangerous corners of nature. I upload twice a week, every Tuesday and Saturday at 2100 hours, so make sure you don't miss out. If you're ready for fear, thrill, and true survival stories, you're in the right place. Nearly 2 years before the partition of India, I set out on a journey that would unknowingly lead me into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I traveled from Calcutta toward the distant lands of Assam, passing through unfamiliar routes and landscapes that felt both intriguing and unsettling. The journey itself was long and exhausting, first by train from Sialda to Golundo, and then by steamer through vast rivers stretching endlessly into the horizon. As the boat moved forward, cutting through the muddy waters, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of isolation. Civilization seemed to fade behind me with every passing mile. Small settlements appeared and disappeared along the riverbanks, but nothing felt permanent. Everything seemed swallowed by nature. Finally, I arrived at a remote village called Ajmeranganj, located in the Sylhet district. It was a place unlike any I had ever seen, surrounded by water on 3 sides and cut off from the world. The air was heavy, the silence unsettling, and the environment carried an unspoken warning. At that moment, I didn't realize it yet, but I had just stepped into a land where danger lived beneath the surface. As the initial excitement of my journey faded, the true nature of Ajmeranganj slowly revealed itself. What I had imagined to be an adventurous escape into the wild turned out to be a strangely lifeless and quiet land. The village was built on small raised mounds scattered across a vast stretch of dry, barren fields. Between these mounds lay open spaces filled with dust and stillness, giving the entire area an eerie, abandoned feeling. There were no thick forests, no flowing greenery, just patches of land that looked tired under the sun. What disturbed me the most was the silence. Not a single bird could be seen flying across the sky, and even the usual sounds of nature were missing. It felt as if life itself avoided this place. The villagers lived simple, routine lives, much like the rural areas of Punjab, but there was no sense of excitement or movement. Days passed slowly, each one blending into the next. I found myself growing restless and frustrated, with nothing to hunt, nothing to explore, and nothing to break the monotony. The stillness wasn't peaceful, it was unsettling. It felt like the land was waiting for something to change everything. Days passed in the same dull rhythm, and my frustration only grew stronger. The silence of Ajmeranganj, once strange, had now become unbearable. With nothing to hunt and nowhere to explore, I felt trapped in a land that refused to offer even the smallest thrill. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, I shared my boredom with Anwar. He listened quietly, a faint smile forming on his face, as if he knew something I didn't. Then he said calmly, Just stay one more week. If you don't witness a miracle, you can leave." His words caught me off guard. There was a strange confidence in his tone, something almost mysterious. I tried to question him further, but he simply avoided giving any details. That smile of his lingered, making me curious and slightly uneasy. A miracle? In a place this lifeless? It sounded impossible. Yet something in his voice made me stay. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the faint hope that this silent land still had something hidden beneath its surface. I agreed to wait. Little did I know, what was coming wasn't just a miracle. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. On the third day after Anwar's strange promise, the sky began to change. Dark, heavy clouds gathered overhead, swallowing the sunlight and casting a shadow over the entire village. The air grew thick and still, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the heavens opened. Rain poured down with a force I had never witnessed before. It wasn't ordinary rain. It was relentless, furious, almost violent. Within hours, the dry land began to disappear beneath rising water. The sound of raindrops crashing against rooftops, trees, and the earth created a constant roar that echoed day and night. There was no pause, no relief. For 5 days and 5 nights, the storm continued without mercy. Rivers overflowed their banks, spilling into fields and pathways. The spaces between the village mounds turned into vast sheets of water. What was once barren land now looked like a restless, expanding sea. From my window, I watched the transformation in awe and disbelief. The lifeless land was no more. But this sudden change didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like something powerful had been unleashed. Something that was about to change everything forever. When the rain finally eased, Ajmiragan was no longer the same place I had first arrived in. The dry, lifeless land had completely transformed into a vast stretch of water. Fields, paths, and open grounds had disappeared beneath the flood, leaving only the raised mounds of villages standing like small islands in an endless watery expanse. Boats became the only means of travel. Where people once walked, they now rode. From morning till evening, small wooden boats moved gracefully across the water, carrying men, women, and children from one village to another. Laughter echoed across the surface, and for the first time since my arrival, the place felt alive. It almost looked like a celebration. Children splashed their hands in the water, women chatted as they traveled, and fishermen eagerly set out with lines and nets. With the river spilling into the land, fish had spread everywhere, turning the flooded fields into unexpected hunting grounds. What once felt like a cursed, silent place now resembled a floating festival. But beneath the laughter and movement, something felt off. The water was too still in some places, too deep in others, and though no one noticed it yet, something unseen had also entered this new world, quietly waiting beneath the surface. As days passed in this newly transformed world, the energy of the villagers began to infect me. What once felt like boredom slowly turned into curiosity, and curiosity into excitement. Everywhere I looked, people were out on the water, fishing, laughing, and making the most of this unexpected blessing. But what truly caught my attention were the young men who hunted fish with long spears. They stood waist-deep in the water, completely still, their eyes locked beneath the surface. Then, in a flash, they would strike. Swift, precise, deadly. Within seconds, a struggling fish would be lifted into the air, pierced clean through. It wasn't just fishing, it was hunting. Something inside me stirred. The same thrill I used to feel in the jungles, tracking wild animals, began to rise again. My blood rushed, my senses sharpened. This may not have been a forest, but it was still a battlefield between hunter and prey. I realized I didn't need dry land or wild beasts to feel alive. The water itself had become the hunting ground. That very moment, I made up my mind. I wouldn't just watch anymore. I would step into the water and hunt. The next day, I could no longer resist. I joined Anwar and a few of his friends, stepping into a small wooden boat that rocked gently on the flooded fields. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, fish, and algae. Every ripple on the water hinted at life moving just beneath the surface, unseen but very much alive. We rowed to a narrow stretch between two high mounds where the river's current surged fiercely. Anwar handed me a spear, and I felt its weight in my hands, a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. A friend stood in the boat with a plate of boiled rice, tossing handfuls into the water as bait. Almost instantly, hundreds of fish swarmed the spot, their silver bodies glinting as they collided in a frenzy. We waded into the water, eyes fixed, hearts pounding. The thrill was unlike anything I had experienced before. Each strike of the spear demanded precision, timing, and courage. Even a single misstep meant nothing caught, and the fish would vanish as quickly as they appeared. I tried a few times, but my inexperience showed. My first attempts were clumsy, and I came up empty-handed, splashing into the water as the others laughed good-naturedly. Still, I felt alive, every nerve in my body alert, ready to hunt. The waters were no longer just a flooded field, they were a battlefield. Just as the thrill of hunting began to settle into a rhythm, the calm of the afternoon was shattered by a scream that pierced through the air. It was sharp, desperate, and filled with terror. My heart jumped into my throat as I spun toward the source. In the water, a boy named Timur was thrashing violently, struggling against something unseen. Panic erupted around me. Spears flailed blindly as friends tried to strike whatever was dragging him under. But within seconds, Timur disappeared beneath the water, leaving a crimson swirl in his wake. The river, once a playground, had become a scene of horror. The water around the boat turned red as the reality sank in. We were not just fishing anymore. We were face to face with something deadly. Anwar shouted, his voice trembling, "It's a crocodile! Get back!" The fear in his eyes mirrored what I felt in my own chest. The water, which moments ago had shimmered like a silver battlefield, now seemed alive with menace. Every ripple, every shadow beneath the surface felt like a predator, waiting, watching. In those terrifying moments, the village's illusion of safety dissolved. The river that had brought life and laughter had now claimed its first victim. The game had changed. Our hunter's playground had become the monster's domain. From that moment, fear was no longer just a thought. It was real. It was deadly. The village was thrown into chaos after Timur's disappearance. Mothers screamed, children clung to their parents, and even the strongest men seemed paralyzed by fear. The water, which had once been a source of life and play, now felt like a living threat, hiding a silent, deadly predator beneath its surface. Every ripple and shadow became a possible death sentence. We immediately organized search parties. Boats moved cautiously through the flooded fields, men peering into the water, spears in hand, trying to detect any sign of the creature. Hours turned into days, but the river revealed nothing. Timur's body was gone, swallowed by the water, leaving only despair in its wake. The fear spread like wildfire. People stopped fishing. Children no longer played in the shallow water. Even stepping into the boat felt like inviting death. The once bustling, floating village now held a grim silence, punctuated only by whispered warnings and anxious cries. I stood at the edge of the water, watching the waves glimmer under the sun, and realized the truth. This was no ordinary crocodile. It was cunning, patient, and deadly. The predator had claimed its first victim, and the entire village understood, without words, that survival here meant walking a razor's edge between life and death. From that day, terror ruled the waters. Calm for description, tense for danger. Pause before shocks. Let silence make the fear real. Emphasize key words: attack, predator, blood, terror. Tone shifts: calm to urgent, to fearful, to dramatic. Immersion. Feel the river, the panic, the predator. Let listeners feel it too. Dialogue and voices, subtle changes for characters. Don't overact. Timur's disappearance left an unhealable wound on the village. Every corner of Ajmeriganj carried the weight of fear. Children huddled close to their mothers, their laughter silenced. Men avoided the flooded fields that had once been alive with activity. Even the simplest task, fetching water, washing clothes, or traveling by boat, was now shadowed by dread. The crocodile had turned the village upside down. Search parties combed the river tirelessly, yet days passed with no sign of Timur. People whispered that the river itself had become a graveyard. Mothers cried openly, clutching the empty air where their children once played. Fathers stared blankly at the water, as if willing their fearsome enemy to reveal itself. Boats that once carried joy and movement now drifted silently, their occupants too afraid to cast nets or venture far. The river's surface betrayed no hint of the predator, but every splash, every ripple sparked panic. Life had ground to a halt. The village, once vibrant and playful, now existed in a tense, fragile state where each breath was heavy with the possibility of tragedy. I realized then that the predator's reach went beyond the physical. It had invaded hearts and minds. Fear had claimed the village even before the crocodile could strike again. Ajmeriganj had changed forever. Just when the village was beginning to adjust to the fear, a new nightmare struck. 10 days after Timur's disappearance, the morning sun shone bright over Ajmeriganj, giving no hint of the horror about to unfold. Women had come to the riverbank to wash clothes, their laughter soft and routine. But the water, calm and glimmering, held a hidden terror. Without warning, a massive splash erupted. A crocodile, larger and more menacing than any I had imagined, lunged from beneath the surface. Panic swept through the women. Most screamed and ran to safety. But one woman, Hira, pregnant and mother to 2 children, slipped. She fell into the river, her terrified cries piercing the air. The crocodile struck instantly, clamping its powerful jaws onto her leg and dragging her beneath the water. Her children screamed, her husband lunged helplessly, and the villagers shouted, trying to reach her. But the predator was faster, stronger, and merciless. In that moment, the river, already a place of fear, transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. Witnessing this, my own pulse raced. This was no longer a tale of hunting or survival. It was a war between humans and a monster that had claimed the river as its domain. I knew then that action was no longer optional. Revenge and justice had become imperative. The horror of Hira's attack ignited something deep within me. Fear still lingered, but it was now fueled by a burning resolve. I couldn't stand by and watch this predator claim more lives. Grabbing my rifle, I steeled myself for what I knew would be the most dangerous encounter of my life. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every ounce of courage demanded action. Anwar and a few villagers joined me, their faces etched with worry and determination. We took a boat and silently rowed toward the exact spot where the attack had occurred, our eyes scanning the water for the faintest sign of movement. The river, calm on the surface, betrayed nothing of the lurking terror beneath. The sun reflected harshly on the waves, making it difficult to spot shadows below, but every ripple felt like a heartbeat, every glimmer like a warning. We knew the crocodile was nearby, watching, patient and deadly. As we approached the thick vegetation along the opposite bank, the predator's likely hideout, I took a deep breath. My rifle was ready, my mind focused, and my heart pounded like a drum. Today, the hunter would become the hunted. This was no ordinary hunt. This was a confrontation between man and monster, a test of courage, skill, and survival. We reached the dense thickets where the crocodile had last attacked. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of wet earth and rotting vegetation. Every small rustle of leaves, every shadow on the water made my heart race. My eyes scanned the bushes, muscles tense, waiting for the first sign of movement. Then a long, thick tail flicked through the reeds. My breath caught. The monster was there, larger and more terrifying than I had imagined. Its armored body glinted under the sunlight, and its eyes, cold, calculating, and predatory, stared directly at us. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. We were mere meters away, yet it felt like an eternity before either of us moved. The crocodile, unaware of our presence, began moving slowly toward the water's edge, its massive head slicing through the surface with deadly precision. Every instinct screamed that this was the moment. I gripped my rifle tighter, my knuckles white, and silently signaled to Anwar and the boatman. In that instant, I realized the predator was not just a force of nature. It was cunning, patient, and ruthless. One wrong move, and it could disappear beneath the waves or strike before I even had a chance to react. The river was silent, the stakes higher than ever. The confrontation had begun. Calm for description, tense for danger. Pause before shocks. Let silence make the fear real. Emphasize key words: attack, predator, blood, terror. Tone shifts, calm to urgent to fearful to dramatic. Immersion, feel the river, the panic, the predator. Let listeners feel it too. Dialogue and voices, subtle changes for characters. Don't overact. The crocodile surged from the reeds, its massive jaws opening wide as it lunged toward our boat. Time slowed in that terrifying moment. The monster's power was unimaginable. Every flick of its tail sent waves crashing against us, rocking the boat violently. I steadied my rifle, heart hammering, hands shaking but focused. As it neared, I aimed for the throat, knowing that a single precise shot was the difference between life and death. The first bullet struck true, tearing through its thick hide, but the beast did not fall. With a deafening thrash, it twisted, its massive body flinging water everywhere. I fired again, this time closer to the head, hearing the explosive impact as it reacted with a violent thrash that nearly capsized our boat. The boatmen yelled and scrambled to maintain balance as the crocodile thrashed, its immense strength evident in every movement. Blood bubbled to the surface, mixing with the murky river. I kept firing, each shot calculated, each moment a desperate gamble. The predator tried to retreat, but exhaustion and injury slowed it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the massive creature floated motionless, its terrifying reign of the river ended. Silence fell over the water. The river that had taken lives now lay still, and the air was heavy with relief, fear, and disbelief. The river, once a relentless predator's domain, now lay eerily silent. The crocodile's enormous body floated half-submerged, its deadly power finally extinguished. Relief washed over me, but it was bitter and heavy. The reality of the tragedy, the lives it had claimed, pressed down on everyone present. Timur, Hira, and the countless others who had faced the river's fury were gone, and their absence hung over Ajmiri Ganj like a shadow. We slowly approached the bank, hauling the massive carcass into the boat with great effort. Its thick, scaly body, once a symbol of unstoppable terror, now seemed lifeless and almost pitiful. Around us, the villagers whispered, some crying openly, others in stunned silence. The horror of what we had witnessed, broken bodies, scattered remains, and lives abruptly ended would remain etched in our memories forever. Yet, in the midst of grief, there was a sense of closure. The monster that had haunted the village was gone. People could once again navigate the waters, though the trauma of what had occurred would linger. As I stood in the boat, rifles still in hand, I realized the river had tested us all, our courage, resilience, and humanity. Ajmiri Ganj would never be the same, but the battle had ended. We had survived, and the ManEater was no more. The story of fear, survival, and courage had reached its conclusion. That was the terrifying story of Ajmer Ganj and the man-eating crocodile that haunted its waters. I'm Sharik, and this is ManEater Chronicles, where we dive into the most shocking true encounters with nature's deadliest predators. If you felt the fear, the suspense, and the thrill, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember, we upload every Tuesday and Saturday at 2100 hours, so hit the bell icon to never miss a story. Share this with friends who love heart-pounding wildlife adventures. And join us next time for another encounter where man and beast collide. Stay alert, stay brave, and remember, nature always has the final say.